everyone. You caught us in mid-conversation. This is another episode of Chai Talk with Wajatali for the Left Hook Substack coming at you at 6:20 p.m. It's been a busy weekend, but I could not miss this opportunity to have my friend Haris Tarin, who is a senior DHS official and currently a leader of Muslim Public Affairs Council, who hit me up and said, listen, I really want to talk about these DOGE cuts because he left DHS, what, Haris, a couple months ago?
September of last year. So
September of last year,
last
right
year.
before the election.
Yeah.
And, he was telling us on the deal what these DOGE cuts, which we all anticipated that these cuts that they're making, specifically the National Weather Service, the cuts that they're making to NOAA, these cuts they're making to, our experts, that when there's going to be a catastrophe because climate change, because hurricanes, because tornadoes, because floods, people are going to die. And folks, as of this recording, it's about 6:20 p.m. live. The death toll in the Texas floods has passed 100 people, and it's rising. Danielle and I did a show a couple hours ago, it was at 80. Now it's at 100. And they're saying in Central Texas, this flood is one of the worst floods in the past 100 years. So many children have died. And folks, I was very deliberate in the framing. I'm talking about how DOGE, Elon Musk and Donald Trump, and DOGE, the teenage incels who took a chainsaw to the budget, killed Texans, killed fellow Americans with these cuts. And they're not done, folks, because hurricane season, Florida, more Americans are going to get killed as a result. So that's the framing, which some people might say is provocative. But I asked Haris beforehand. He said, nope, that's the correct framing. So Haris, I yield the floor to you. Tell us, connect the dots for us.
No, thank you so much, Rajat, for having me on. When the DOGE cuts started to take place at FEMA, at the National Weather Service, and in general in the federal emergency response industry, we knew, those of us who had been at DHS, those of us who had responded to actual natural disasters and emergencies, both human disasters and natural disasters, which FEMA was created to do, to respond to situations like this. And having been a first responder many years ago on different hurricanes and different emergencies, we knew that when these cuts started to take place at FEMA, at NOAA, at the National Weather Service, that this is going to have an impact, a real impact on people's lives. It was going to impact. We were hoping that it wouldn't be loss of lives, that maybe it would be delayed in emergency services that people would get. It would be delays in terms of food services that people would get when they need after an emergency takes place. But what we unfortunately saw right away was within a few weeks, a couple of months, we saw Americans dying, now over 100 Americans dying, young children, young girls who were at day camp, they are missing and they have been dying. That is because what we did was irresponsible here in Washington, D.C. Those cuts to FEMA, to NOAA, to the National Weather Services, and I'll just give you a few numbers which are
Please.
astounding, because really it's a dereliction of duty. It comes down to a dereliction of duty. So a 20% reduction to the FEMA overall workforce. That's minus 2,000 positions, over 2,000 positions ahead of the 2025 hurricane season. When scientists and meteorologists had already predicted that the 2025 hurricane season was going to be one of the worst on record, how can you cut 20% of the workforce of the organization at the federal level that responds to emergency crises? 20% over 2,000 people before the hurricane season starts. That is dereliction of duty. And who was it that was making these cuts? It was teenagers, young kids who had never had experience in emergency response, who had never had experience in responding to hurricanes, to storms, to tornadoes, to earthquakes. This is our country. We have so much land in this country, and we have so many different weather patterns, and we have so many different natural disasters that take place. Earthquakes, hurricanes, tornadoes, flash flooding, which we saw here in Texas. All of that was ignored. All of that was ignored, and these young kids made these cuts. And so that's just to FEMA. $664 million cut in this new big beautiful bill to FEMA and emergency response services. Imagine that. A week after we make those cuts, we saw the immediate results, right? To the National Weather Service and NOAA, roughly 25% of the senior scientists at
Yep.
NOAA and National Weather Service, and these are people who study weather patterns. These are scientists who are predicting the weather. These are the folks who we rely on to give us our weather forecasts, whether they be daily forecasts or monthly or weekly or pattern forecasts, are either dismissed or retired. 25%. And two senior warning officers at the Austin, San Antonio, Texas office were part of these cuts and these dismissals and retirement. So you can see that, like, when you make cuts and you do them irresponsibly and you talk about waste and fraud, it's not really about waste and fraud, it's political. It has a real impact on the lives of Americans in cities, in towns, in camps now. Young girls who are camping out, their lives are being impacted because of decisions, dumb decisions made here in Washington, D.C. So when you thin the workforce, when you thin the staffing and thin the forecast modeling staff, this is what you get.
And also, speaking about inexperience, it's not just dumb young kids at DOGE. I want to remind people that the acting FEMA head, David Richardson, claimed in a briefing that he was unaware that USA had a hurricane season. That is the acting FEMA head, David Richardson, who said this about a month and a half ago. And then two folks at FEMA were like, "Excuse me? You didn't?" He literally had no idea. So these are the people that are put in place to lead us during hurricane season, during climate change, and also Project 2025 openly admitted this, right? They said this is climate change alarmism and this is waste and fraud and we don't need all of this and we can cut it and we'll be okay. So this is part and parcel of Project 2025. It is part and parcel of the Republican agenda. It's part and parcel of Trump and Musk. They came in, they did this. We were unprepared. And now the White House, as of 1 hour ago, I don't know if you saw this news, but they're saying, they're dismissing the claims that the DOGE cuts had anything to do with this, that this is just would have happened the way, it would have happened regardless. Your
So
response to the White House.
I've been at DHS. I worked for Bob Fenton, who was FEMA administrator for 3 different presidents at DHS. I worked
Mm.
underneath him at Operation Allies Welcome when he led a human disaster response. I worked directly. I was his chief of staff. I know exactly the type of people that we have in government who are amazing civil public servants. These were civil servants who had become experts, who had worked in federal emergency response since Hurricane Katrina, which I was a first responder to. Bob Fenton was known as America's emergency response guru. Not only a Democrat, works for Republican presidents, Democratic presidents. These are the type of people that we need in leadership positions, not politicals. These are technical leadership positions. Political and politicos should not be running FEMA, should not be running NOAA, should not be running the National Weather Service, should not be running the Department of Education, should not be running institutions that require technical skill sets. We don't have if you're letting go of 20%, 25%, if you're not rehiring, if you've got hiring freezes at FEMA, at NOAA, at the National Weather Services, at DHS, if you've got, and then what you're encouraging is you're encouraging people to retire so that you don't have to hire those people back. And the only people that you've got in technical positions now at leadership level are politicals. What do you expect? What do you expect? When emergency and crises hit, we will then face the brunt of it. And Americans all around the country should be scared because it's Texas today, right? The Texas administration of Abbott is probably is on the same page with the federal with the administration here in Washington. But if an earthquake happens in California, if a hurricane happens in Oklahoma City, a tornado in North Carolina, we're going to get the same outcome, unfortunately.
Yeah, but we won't get any sympathy, and instead, if it's a blue state or if it's a governor or a leader that doesn't kiss the ring, we're gonna have to beg for funds because I want to remind people that Josh Hawley of Missouri was last month or month and a half ago was publicly begging Kristi Noem for FEMA funding, and talk about this FEMA funding that Donald Trump wants to dole out on a state by state basis, depending upon who he likes and who he doesn't like. What's going to be the impact of that?
So this is the tragedy of all of this, right? The tragedy of all of this is we're becoming a nation that is being divided based on our political views and the type of Democratic or Republican governors, mayors, assemblymen, or women that we have around this country. So rather than having
No.
staff, a competent staff, and regardless of which American, whether you're a Republican, a Democrat, an independent, a democratic socialist, regardless of your background, your political affiliation, your government serves you. This has been the one rule of American politics. When one American or one American city or one American state is impacted, we come together as Americans and we support them because at the time of crisis, at the time of need, we're not supposed to get political. The tragedy is that that is exactly what is happening. So, based on your political affiliation, on your political stripes, we are now handing out handouts as we wish. So, if I like you, I'm going to give you money. If I don't like you, I'm going to send ICE at you. If I like you, I'm going to give you FEMA funding. If I don't like you, I'm going to withhold the FEMA funding. If I like you, you'll get a carve out in the big, beautiful bill. If I don't like you, you will not get that carve out. This is not America. That is not how we're supposed to function
Well,
as a
this is
form of
America,
government.
Harris. This is America 2025. And the sneak preview was I remember in the first Trump administration when Alabama, I believe, was tornadoes. He told Alabama because it's his base, they're going to get the A plus treatment from FEMA. And then California, which we're both from California, had devastating fires in the first administration. In the second administration, he mocked them in the first administration and he mocked them in the second administration. California is the most populous state in America, 40 million people, and is the fourth or fifth most lucrative big economy in the world, but he doesn't care precisely for what you said because it's about him, his money, his base, his ego, and also Elon Musk. They made these cuts to NWS. They made these cuts to NOAA. They made these cuts to USAID, which has killed 300,000 kids. They've made these cuts to Veteran Affairs. They've made these cuts to IRS. But guess what didn't get cut? The military industrial complex. And in this bill from hell, they made cuts to Medicaid, but guess what they didn't cut, folks? Oh, they gave $175 billion for ICE, his Gestapo, right? And then the Mother Jones just came out with this. Tragedy in Texas, folks, where again, for those who are joining us, Haris, I have a glitch on my Substack that they're trying to fix. Are people joining us live right now? I can't see.
I think they are, yes.
How
People are
many do you
joining.
have?
I have 691.
Wonderful, folks. I can't
Yeah,
see
yeah.
you. Usually I give a shout out to the comments. Substack has a glitch. So thank you all for joining the 700 people and for the comments. Usually I give you all a heads up and Haris can highlight some comments if he likes. But for
Sure.
those who are joining us, we're joined by Haris Tarin, senior DHS official who is now a leader of Muslim Public Affairs Council. We'll pivot in a second because I want his thoughts on Mamdani. But when Mother Jones said this tragedy in Texas, which 100 dead so far, unfortunately, seems that number is going to rise. I'm quoting their Blue Sky post, is particularly chilling in light of a May open letter issued by 5 former National Weather Service directors who wrote that agency staff, quote, will have an impossible task to continue its level of services in light of Trump cuts. Now,
Uh,
this Trump administration can't claim it wasn't warned. So then I ask you, do they just not care? And, or was it part of the plan? Or were they arrogant enough to assume, they're wrong, whatever, we'll get it done, we'll privatize it?
Yes, you remember what Elon said about when Elon made the cuts, and he made a few of the cuts to like senior air traffic controller, and
FAA, yeah.
leadership, FAA leadership, and said, you know what, when you make cuts, we get it wrong, but then you try to fix it. So you can do that. Maybe you can do that when you're building Tesla vehicles on the assembly line and you get something wrong and you can do that and you can go back and rehire, as he said, some people and fix the problem. You can't do that with people's lives. When
Nope.
someone dies, you cannot bring them back to life. When a tragedy hits, you cannot change that tragedy. The problem now is that it's not just the response, the initial, it's not just the prediction that's the problem with what happened in Texas. It's the thinning of the staff for response.
Yep.
So the FEMA surge force was trimmed by a third. The surge forces are those individuals that respond immediately after a natural or a human disaster. They're the ones who minimize the damage that has been done by whether a natural disaster or a human disaster. That then saves lives, right? So if you're minimizing that damage, you're rescuing people, you're making sure that you have enough equipment, helicopters, boats, rescue equipment. Those surge teams were cut by one third. Only two incident management teams reached Kerr County in the first 36 hours of the flooding. Only two. Imagine for the all of Kerr County.
And
When,
imagine how many people could have been saved.
precisely. When over, what was it? It was the number, I think there was something like um 30 billion gallons of water ran into the Guadalupe River. Imagine the amount of rainfall within 6 hours to send that much water to the Guadalupe River. If you had a proper surge workforce that could respond immediately, it could save lives. It saves lives. That's what emergency management is about. And so all of, this whole thing that, we'll leave it to the private sector, we'll leave it to the states. The states don't have the funding. The states don't have the equipment. The private sector does not have the infrastructure to get out and bring people on. Red Cross doesn't have the infrastructure, doesn't have the equipment, doesn't have the helicopters, doesn't have the boats to go out and rescue people in the same way. And so, yeah, this whole idea of we're going to let the private sector do that. No, the private sector is not going to do that. The private sector is not good at responding immediately when people are in trouble. I remember I was a first responder during Hurricane Katrina in Mobile, Alabama. I remember it was the National Guard. It was
Yep.
the National Guard and it was FEMA that was saving lives. It was not the private sector. The private sector is too afraid to go into these spaces, number one. And number two, they don't have the resources and the equipment to do that. And they don't have the relationships with the local communities. You need relationships with churches. You need relationship with the Rotary clubs. You need relationship with the community centers. These are the individuals and communities who eventually give you access so you can go and help people. And so this whole thing about shifting this away from the federal government and giving it to the private sector or the states, that's a bunch of baloney. That will not work.
Well, I mean, they don't care about it not working. They care about making money. And so, folks, when it comes to the National Weather Service, you know this, that Trump has openly said that he's open to privatizing it, which means that you and me will have to pay for that weather force, because we're in Virginia.
Yeah,
I was telling Danielle earlier, remember last week we got that flash flood warning at like 15 minutes in
yeah,
advance. I'm like,
yeah, yeah.
everything's fine. And then I got home and I'm like, holy crap, for 10 minutes it went wild. And my wife called me. She goes, yeah, I got stuck in this flash flood warning. But without that warning, suppose I was driving, suppose I decided to take out, I don't have a boat if I was rich. Suppose you do all these different things, right? But based on that information, you're like, oh, let me go home. Let me actually alter my plans. Let me not drive on the road, right? Now we're going to have to pay for that, Haris. And if you pay the top dollar, then you'll get the premium service about that category 5 hurricane, especially in the age of disinformation, especially in the age when all these meteorologists and all these experts are being cut. Who do you rely upon when you can't trust your own government, Haris? That's also what people don't realize, right? So people are going to be literally blind during a crisis. Huh? When did that happen before? Oh, yeah. COVID, which killed more than 1 million Americans. We are living in the dumbest timeline and we're being killed by the dumbest, most corrupt people on earth. It pains me, Haris. It pains me. And, Ted Cruz said, don't politicize this. And I've seen overwhelming majority of people on social media. Very few people are gloating. Maybe I saw a couple of profiles saying, well, this is what you voted for. But even then, a lot of liberals or a lot of people who are progressive or didn't vote for Trump corrected them and said we shouldn't take joy in anyone's death, right? But speaking about not politicizing it, mother effer, you politicize everything, and
Everything,
then and
everything.
and then you went to Cancun with your family while your fellow Texans were freezing to death because
Wasn't he just
Texans,
in
folks,
Europe? Wasn't he just in Europe? Right?
and
Like,
getting humiliated by Tucker Carlson. And why, folks? Because Texans, Republicans are so smart. They've politicized basic shit like weather and climate change and, national security and federal emergency response. Can you tell them about the grid that Texas is on compared to the national grid? Tell them.
right. I mean, well, everybody saw the grid that they're on, right? They refused to join the national grid because they're Texans. Because Abbott, it wasn't the Texans. Because I want to make sure that people understand the people of Texas were not the ones who made the decision not to be part of the federal grid.
Yeah,
During Biden's time or Obama's time or whatever time that was, it was Abbott's decision, right? It was Abbott's decision. It was the political's decision not to join the national grid. And when hurricanes and storms happened, Texans were out of power, without power. Millions of Texans were without power for weeks and some for months because they could not access. Because why? The state level power run stations, the state level power and water utility services don't have the same level of infrastructure as the federal ones. So they're willing to put Texans' lives at risk, willing to kill Texans because they want to make a political point, and then they tell everyone else not to politicize things. Talk about not politicizing. I mean, I'm 2 blocks from the White House right here. Netanyahu is in the White House asking for more money while Texans are suffering right now. Like
Mm.
the level of political craziness that is happening right now, actual craziness, while we have a foreign leader who's asking for money for weapons and now wants bunker busting bombs and B-2s to be given to him. We've got Americans suffering, and we're cutting American services, education, federal emergency management, Medicaid, Medicare. We're willing to cut all of that, but we're willing to
National Institute
continue
of
to
Health,
National
veterans
Institute of
losing
Health,
their jobs,
but we're willing
cancer
to
research.
continue to fund the war machine.
And, they're making money, and we don't have to imagine it, folks, because as Haris said just last week, all these Republicans, save a handful, voted for this disastrous bill that literally will cut $1 trillion off of Medicaid, which will completely crumble the infrastructure. In addition to kicking off at least 17 million Americans off of Medicaid, right?
Yeah.
You're going to gut rural hospitals. You're going to gut emergency responses. You're going to gut nursing homes, right? SNAP benefits. Also, you're going to have Medicare cuts in that involved, right? Then they're going to go after Social Security. But they found $175 billion for ICE. They found enough money for ICE, which now becomes a personal Gestapo for Donald Trump to now terrorize literally Americans, not foreign threats, domestic threats, which includes people who look like me and Haris, including citizens. The masked ICE agents have accidentally, or let's just be honest, deliberately deported citizens and legal immigrants, including, Kilmar Abrego Garcia, who was tortured in El Salvador. And our money is not going to, help a federal response here when it comes to national disaster. $6 million went to the worst Palestinian on earth, Bukele, the crypto bro in El Salvador. The naked oligarchical grift, the naked kleptocracy, the white supremacy and the capitalism in full view, folks, in full view. They don't care about you. They don't care about us. To quote George Carlin, it's a big club and you ain't in it. But Netanyahu's in it and
Yeah.
APAC's in it. And this is where I wanted to pivot, if you don't mind, Haris.
Yeah.
How many people are watching? Because I can't see.
We've got about 850 people watching.
850 folks, thanks for joining. If you joined a bit late, I'm going to have this up later today. This is Haris Tarin, a former senior DHS official, was talking about, and I'm so happy, Haris, for your expertise, connecting the dots, bringing out the numbers, talking about exactly how these DOGE cuts have resulted in preventable crises, preventable deaths. That means these people, I'm going to say it, killed people deliberately and intentionally with their reckless, negligent mismanagement, with their greed, with these cuts. They don't say you weren't warned because, again, I quoted this Mother Jones piece that says in an open letter in May, 5 former National Weather Service directors said that these The agency staff, quote, will have an impossible task to continue its current level of services, and voila, national disasters hit. They're going to hit. We have climate change. Look at the weather now in Virginia, man. It is wild today. If you're outside today, Haris, it's
Yep.
going to get hotter,
Yep.
right? So what do you think is going to happen, folks? More people will die. And as this is happening, they somehow find money, as Haris was saying, for the war machine. They find money for Israel to go and continue its genocide with U.S. bombs and monies. And they find time to demonize Zoran Mamdani for a quote that he didn't say, for a slogan that he didn't chant, and they find time to villainize Bob Villain. But when Donald Trump openly says an anti-Semitic slur, Shylock, and then doubles down on it, gone from the news. When Donald Trump dines with Nick Fuentes, a Nazi lover, gone from the news, right? When Elon Musk does the double Sig Heils, he's autistic. It was an awkward expression. But let's focus on Zoran Mamdani. And not just Republicans, folks. Let's be honest, Harris. Democratic leaders. Hakeem Jeffries, Senator Gillibrand has refused to endorse Mamdani. And now, in your new position, you are a leader at Muslim Public Affairs Council. Talk to us about the double standards that we're seeing and why Americans should care about how they're attacking. And by they, I'm talking about the establishment. Republicans, Democrats, APAC
Right.
billionaires are attacking Mamdani with these Islamophobic smears that you and I grew up with since the war on terror.
It's a really interesting segue to make into Mamdani, because there was deep resonation amongst New Yorkers with what Mamdani's message was. And I'm connecting it back to what's happening in Texas for a reason. Americans in Texas got their Medicare slashed, right? Texans, let's just take Texas for a second. Texans got their Medicaid slashed. Texans are getting their healthcare slashed. Texans in rural areas will have hospitals essentially shut down because of the lack of Medicare access and lack of Medicare funding. All of that is happening. The same stuff is happening in New York City. Mamdani's message is resonating with New Yorkers because of what's happening to them and to Texans and others. When you're cutting people's when you're cutting people's health care, when you're cutting people's elderly care funding, when you're cutting funding to nursing homes, yet you're upping the budget of ICE tenfold. Tenfold, you're upping the budget of ICE and giving another $150 billion to the Pentagon, yet cutting Americans' healthcare and education and access to preserving the dignity of their parents and elders as they're getting older. What you get is the resonation of New Yorkers to Mamdani, because Mamdani, what did he say? All he said was, the establishment, the billionaires, the Wall Street bros, what are they doing? They continue to spike your rent. All I want is a rent freeze. All I want is maybe a reduced or free bus ride for you, because it's freaking expensive to go to work. Some people can't even afford to go to work because they can't live in the city. They have to leave the city to come back into the city, and they can't even afford the commute. So let's make buses free or reduce pricing. Let's freeze the rent. And let's focus on providing assistance to New Yorkers. That resonated. And you know how it resonated? There was districts in the city that Trump had won by 7 points, by 6 points, that flipped to Mamdani by 14, 15 points. Mamdani didn't run on a Sharia law platform. He didn't
Yes,
run on a caliphate platform.
just kidding.
he, he wasn't trying to bring the supreme leader of become the supreme leader of New York City and wear a turban. That's not what he ran on. He ran on an economic message, a populist economic message, because Americans are getting screwed by the establishment, whether that's the government here in Washington, whether it's the tech bros in Silicon Valley, whether it's the billionaires like Bill Ackman and these guys out in New York City. And Bill Ackman was very clear. It was like, he was open. He said, "Listen, I met with Cuomo, I met with Adams. I told one of them to drop out, and I will fund the other one." So he's
He said it on
telling
Twitter.
you
The supervillain plot was revealed on Twitter. He shared it with everyone,
completely.
folks.
Like the masks were off. So Mamdani, the reason they're going after Mamdani's faith and the fact that he says something that he didn't actually even say, and they're going after him as a Palestinian, as a socialist, as
But he's
a
not even Palestinian,
he's not even Palestinian, but they're calling him Palestinian, right?
as
They
a
call him
slur, right?
Palestinian. But the reason he's resonating with people, and another poll that came out today, he's at 43%.
Yep,
He's
saw
leaving
that.
Adams and Cuomo, right? The message that's resonating is that people are sick of it. They're sick of the establishment. They're
Yep,
sick of the financial sector, the finance sector. They're sick of the military-industrial complex taking their benefits and the little that they have and giving more to the war machine. I mean, ICE is part of that military-industrial complex. Have you
absolutely.
seen how ICE is dressed now in American cities? It's
Looks
like
like
someone
army,
who would
man.
be dressed in the mountains of
Yep,
Afghanistan fighting the Taliban or
yep.
fighting a war somewhere else. They've got full camouflage, night goggles, full on every type of tactical weapon that you can imagine on the
And
streets of
mask. Let's
America
not
and
forget,
masked
and
and
mask,
fully masked, right?
and not
So,
giving their IDs.
so no matter what they throw at Mamdani, they can be as Islamophobic as they want to be. They can be as xenophobic as they want to be. They can say he's running on a caliphate platform. None of that is going to actually stick.
Did you hear that he's also African and Asian American? Did you hear that,
Right.
Haris?
Yeah.
Did you hear that? Did you know that his family is from Uganda and Uganda is a country in Africa and that there were Indians who moved from India to Uganda and then got kicked out due
300
to
years
Idi Amin?
ago.
Yeah, and then had to settle here in America. Did you know that? It's wild. I don't think I could I
Crazy.
don't think I could vote for him now. It's
It's like
interesting what you say is that it doesn't matter, right?
it doesn't matter.
Because people are sick and tired. And the through line, and I'm glad you mentioned, usually I'm the one who mentions it. I'm glad someone else mentions it, is the twin sins of America are what I always say is white supremacy and capitalism. To break it down, racism and greed, manifested purely through Donald Trump and MAGA. And people are realizing, damn it, I'm sick of this. Why are the rich getting richer and why am I getting scraps? Why am I giving money in taxes and I'm not having infrastructure? Where is this money going? When will it ever trickle down? Why is my freaking city unaffordable? Why do people like Jeff Bezos get to have $50 million weddings? Why does Elon Musk get more money for Starlink? And why do I have to scrap and beg just so my kid can have freaking lunch at school? And oh yeah, now he can't even have lunch at school. Now we need to have like freaking drives and GoFundMe's for lunch at school. And how come we're still in the richest country on earth? But I don't feel rich. You know what? F capitalism. I want something new. Call it democratic socialist, call it whatever. People don't care, Harris. And that's why I think the establishment is freaking out
Yes.
because they have tried to crush Zoran Mamdani. They threw everything at him. Bill Clinton. They threw Clyburn at him. They're
Bloomberg.
throwing Jeffries at him. Bloomberg, New York Times with hit pieces, and it still didn't work. Islamophobia, anti-Palestinian bigotry, racism, still didn't work. Fear mongering. Now he's a communist. Still doesn't work. And I think
Doesn't
it
work.
doesn't work because what the establishment doesn't realize is people are sick and tired of the establishment. They're sick and tired of the institution. They're like, you know what? I'll give democratic socialism a try. If it's gonna friggin' make my city affordable, let's try it. And I think the fact that they can't control the narrative, Horace, and the
Yeah.
fact that it's spreading, that's what's freaking them out.
That's what's scaring them. That's literally what is scaring them because usually they're able to step in and manipulate the system and manipulate the process through money, through influence, through influencers. That is not happening anymore, right? They're not that manipulation is minimizing. And so, what tells you is that if a district in New York went to Trump and now is going to Mamdani, Americans are not ideological at the core. The average American is not ideological. The average American wants to pay their mortgage, wants their kids to go to a decent school, wants to put food on the table, wants some health care, and that's it. And the problem with the establishment is they can't recognize that, right? Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer, they can't recognize that what people want is the basic necessities of life. And if
Which
you
they
can
can no
speak
longer
to that,
afford.
which they no longer can afford, if you can speak to that, which Mamdani did eloquently, people will respond to you. That's what Donald Trump tapped into. For years, he tapped into those difficulties that people were going through, right? What he did, of course, was he said, blame it on the immigrants, blame it on the browns, blame it on the blacks, blame it on the minorities. That was his message. But you could actually take that and you can do something positive with it, which is Mamdani has been able to do. He's been able to mobilize a coalition of people in New York that no other New York mayor had been able to do. Young people, older people, immigrants, white people. He's now there's a lot of a willingness within the Latino and Black communities to listen to him, right? And so when you've got that type of coalition, you get the result is like polls that came out today, which has him in the lead, way in the lead over Adams and over Cuomo. And now they're going to continue to try every dirty smear campaign that they can to try to undermine him, but it's just not sticking.
It's not
You
going to
talk
work.
about Teflon Don, this is Teflon Mamdani.
Teflon Mamdani with the takbir. Allahu Akbar. We're just kidding, folks. Listen, I don't think it's going to work either. I think he's going to win because of the reasons you mentioned. I think people are sick and tired of the establishment and the fact that he didn't bend the knee like Gavin Newsom did originally, and the fact that he didn't bend the knee like Elisa Slotnick, and he didn't roll over and play dead, which was the original advice of James Carville and all the establishment types. The fact that he fought, he stayed on message, he's consistent, he went woke, and he said, my core message, why can't New York City be affordable for everyone? And then when they had them all line up and say, where will you go if you're elected? And everyone said, instead of, that's the version of establishment Disneyland. I'm not making this up, folks. Literally all the Democrats said, I am going to Israel. It will be my 4th trip, the Holy Land. I'm not making this up. And then Zoran's the only one who said, I don't think I'm going to go anywhere. I'm the mayor of New York. I'm going to stay here. And then this is the worst timeline that we live in because guess who agreed with him? Tucker Carlson and Marjorie Taylor Greene.
That's
The
right.
through line is winning easy through line for Democrats, but the reason why they can't do it because they're part of the establishment. It's us versus the 1%, the many versus the billionaires. They want restoration to the good old days of neoliberalism and Clinton, and we want reformation.
They want
Whoever
the Gilded Age, man. I'll go even further. They don't need. They don't want
18th
the
century,
90s.
19th century.
Yeah, they want to go to the Gilded Age. What they want to do is, my wife and I were watching this Netflix show. It's about the Gilded Age. They literally want that, right? What they want is the billionaires, the Carnegies and the Rockefellers,
Vanderbilt.
the Vanderbilts. They did everything, right? They ran government and they also were the charitable organizations. So what they want is for us to go back to that a few mainly white men will control all markets. They'll decide who becomes president. They'll decide who becomes vice president. They then will also respond to emergency disasters. They will give charity to who they want to give charity to. They will give free school lunches to who they want to give free lunches to, but they don't want that equity and equality to be done by the federal government because historically the federal government has tried at least to a certain extent to equalize the level playing field. And that's why when they say states' rights and when they say for the government to get out of the system, they mean the federal government should stop trying to make us equal because our racism should be acceptable.
Which is why they hate that 14th Amendment. And folks, thank you, Haris. I kept you much longer than I said you would, but you were on a roll today. So I just pressed play on you and let you go. Can you tell all the people who are watching? I can't see it because of the glitch. Any good comments? Want to give people a shout out?
There's
Do
a lot
people
of
enjoy
great
Haris?
comments. We've got about 1,000 people who are on. Lots of really good comments about the billionaire class and what they want to do, and the 99% and the impact of the billionaire class on the 99%. So it seems like people are really engaged.
Thank you. For the
They're
1,000 people who
responding.
The 1,000 people tuned in. We've been speaking
Yeah.
for about 40 minutes. This is Haris Tarin. He was a former senior official with the DHS, now a leader for Muslim Public Affairs Council. Haris, before I let you go, shamelessly promote yourself. And before I let you go, folks, come back in about a minute. I'm going to invite Mossab Abu Toha. Mossab is a Pulitzer Prize-winning Palestinian poet and writer. He was the one who writes these commentary pieces for the New Yorker. He's the one who escaped Gaza with his family, born in a refugee camp. He's the one who I'm going to talk to about how things are changing when it comes to Palestine and Israel. And he's going to make the argument how Democrats and Republicans can no longer ignore both the genocide and Israel's occupation of Gaza. It's not enough just to go against the genocide. If you saw the CNN poll and the Gallup poll, my God, in my lifetime, Haris, I have never seen such a shift because the genocide has been live streamed in real time. So I'm going to bring him on in about 30 seconds. But before I do, Haris, thank you so much for your time. Shamelessly promote yourself.
Thank you so much. I'm Haris Tarin on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And thank you, Wajahid, for having me. There was a great conversation.
All right. Let me stay on for a second. Maybe you can say salams to Mossab as well. And then I could get you on. Let's see. Mossab. All right. Let's see if he comes in. And also, real quick, before Mossab comes in, tell us what MPAC is doing.
The Muslim Public Affairs Council, MPAC, is a public policy advocacy organization. We work on protecting the First Amendment and civil rights of all Americans, but specifically now Americans on college campuses whose free speech and First Amendment rights are being impacted by this administration and by so many other entities in our society, law enforcement, protecting a lot of students who are being impacted by ICE raids, supporting them, paying their legal defense fees, and making sure that they have the rights, as all Americans should, to speak out freely, regardless of their political views and opinions.
All right, awesome, man. Thank you, Haris, for joining us. We're going to have this conversation up for the 1,000 people who joined us a bit late. This was Haris Tarin, and he was giving us his expertise as a former senior DHS official. And I'm going to try to get Mossab Abu Toa on so I don't have to do a new stream. If I can't, I'll just go on in a second.